Most of us want to both increase muscle mass and reduce body fat. It is commonly suggested that muscle growth will only occur with a calorie surplus, and fat loss will only occur with a calorie deficit. However, is this really true, or can we build muscle and lose fat at the same time? To answer this question, we first need to quickly cover the concept of energy balance. This is the basic concept of calories in versus calories out. In other words, how many calories we eat versus how many we expend. Simply put, if we eat more calories than we expend, also known as a calorie surplus, then we will gain weight over time. And if we eat fewer calories than we expend, also known as a calorie deficit, then we will lose weight over time. And if our calorie intake and expenditure are balanced, then we will maintain weight over time. We also need to understand the roles of training and nutrition in the body composition process. While both are important, each plays a slightly different role. Resistance training is the stimulus for muscle growth. This is what triggers the anabolic processes, which ultimately result in hypertrophy adaptations. Without training, there is no stimulus for muscle growth to occur, so regardless of nutritional status, we won't grow any muscle mass. Nutrition, on the other hand, is more important for the regulation of body fat. We need to eat in a calorie deficit over time to see significant fat loss. Furthermore, nutrition also plays a supportive role in the muscle growth process. While it doesn't stimulate muscle growth, it can help to maximize the muscle growth response from resistance training. Consuming a high protein intake and being in a calorie surplus over time will provide a more anabolic environment, which is likely to result in more favorable muscle growth from resistance training. So the question is, can we build muscle mass and lose body fat at the same time? The answer to this is yes. It is possible to build muscle and lose fat simultaneously. This idea is also known as body recomposition. This research review confirmed this speculation by analysing the evidence on body recomposition. It was concluded that recomposition can and does occur even in experienced lifters. However, the extent to which this occurs is dependent on many different variables, which we will explore shortly. However, we first need to explain how body recomposition can possibly occur. Well, essentially there are two key adaptations we require here. First is weight loss or maintenance, and second is muscle growth. If we build muscle while maintaining or losing weight, then this means fat loss must have occurred. Because if muscle was built and weight was either maintained or reduced, then another tissue must have been lost, which would be body fat. Let's now explore the various factors which may influence our ability to recomp. The first and most important factor is resistance training. As we mentioned, training is the stimulus for muscle growth, and without it we won't experience hypertrophy. So regardless of energy balance, we need to provide a good hypertrophic stimulus for any muscle growth to occur. We obviously want to provide the most hypertrophic stimulus possible to maximize the likelihood of muscle growth and therefore the ability to experience recomposition. We probably want to focus on hypertrophy style resistance training rather than strength focused training, since this will provide the most hypertrophic stimulus and therefore maximize our likelihood of recomposition occurring. Without going into too much detail, this is best achieved by training in the approximate 6 to 20 rep range with high weekly volumes and taking sets close to failure. The second consideration is energy balance. Body recomposition can occur at both maintenance calories and a calorie deficit. So first we need to explore whether we should be at maintenance or in a deficit. We can build muscle in both a calorie deficit and at maintenance calories. However, each energy balance state has its own unique benefits. If we eat at maintenance, then we are probably more likely to see better muscle growth compared with a deficit, although we will also see less fat loss because our body mass will stay the same. On the other hand, if we eat in a deficit, then we may not see as much muscle growth, but we will lose much more body fat in the process. So depending on our current body fat level and what level of leanness you want to achieve, either maintenance calories or a deficit may be appropriate for different trainees. However, because most of us want to both build muscle and reduce significant body fat, then it would probably be more desirable to eat in somewhat of a deficit. This is because we usually have multiple kilograms of fat that we want to lose, so to get to our goal leanness, we would need to build multiple kilograms of muscle. This is unrealistic to achieve in any reasonable time frame, and we may not even achieve this over our entire lifting career. So for significant results, most people are best off eating in a deficit rather than at maintenance calories. So the next question is, how much of a deficit should we be in? Well, there is no clear-cut answer to this, but we can make some general recommendations. This study explored the effects of two different rates of weight loss in athletes performing regular resistance training. It was found that a slower rate of weight loss over time tended to result in better body composition outcomes. As we can see, the slow weight loss group saw a small increase in muscle mass with a greater proportion of fat loss, while the fast weight loss group saw a slight decrease in muscle mass during the diet. This suggests that we are more likely to see body recomposition occur with a slower rate of weight loss compared with a fast rate of loss. Therefore, trainees are probably best off being in a more conservative deficit if your goal is to see simultaneous muscle growth and fat loss. The next factor which will influence our ability to recomp is protein intake. Independent of energy balance, daily protein intake has an impact on muscle growth. We generally find that higher daily protein intakes tend to result in superior muscle growth when consumed in conjunction with a resistance training protocol. For example, this meta-analysis found that there was a dose-response relationship between protein intake and gains in muscle mass. However, this dose response diminished significantly after consuming around 1.5 grams per kilogram of protein per day. So trainees probably want to try and consume a total of around 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, and even more than this will likely have slight additional benefits. This will increase our likelihood and magnitude of body recomposition occurring. This can be seen in this study, which explored the effects of protein intake on body composition changes during a calorie deficit while performing a resistance training program. As we can see, the trainees consuming a higher protein intake of 2.4 grams per kilogram per day experienced gains in lean body mass while simultaneously losing a greater proportion of fat. However, the lower protein intake group, who consumed 1.2 grams per kilogram per day, were only able to maintain lean mass during the weight loss period, and therefore lost a smaller proportion of body fat. So if we want to maximize our chances of recomposition occurring, we should probably aim to consume a fairly high daily protein intake. This will maximize the anabolic response of resistance training and increase the likelihood of muscle growth occurring during a calorie deficit. Another factor to consider is sleep. Independent of how we train and what we eat, sleep seems to have a significant influence on both muscle growth and fat loss. We generally find that poor sleep tends to result in worse body composition outcomes. For example, this study explored the effects of sleep restriction on body composition changes during a calorie deficit. One group slept for 8.5 hours per night, while another group slept for 5.5 hours per night. While both groups lost a similar amount of total body weight, we can see here in the blue bars that the group sleeping longer saw a greater proportion of fat loss and less muscle loss than the restricted sleep group. It should be noted that neither group saw recomposition in this study because there was no resistance training conducted during the process. So this study suggests that if we maintain a longer sleep duration, we probably have a better chance at seeing muscle growth during a calorie deficit, and also a greater proportion of fat loss. This will increase our likelihood and the magnitude of body recomposition occurring. The next factor which will influence our ability to recomp is current body fat level. Most of us know through anecdote that when we are at high levels of body fat, our ability to gain muscle while losing body fat is much more likely. However, when we get to a leaner body fat, recomposition is less likely to occur. We have already covered multiple examples of recomposition occurring in trainees at a relatively healthy body fat range. However, if we look at lifters getting to very lean conditions, we rarely see recomposition occurring. For example, this case study explored the physiological effects of a male bodybuilder going through a contest preparation diet. This particular athlete dieted down to around 4 to 5% body fat over an 8-month period. As we can see, the athlete was able to maintain and even slightly increase muscle mass within the first 3 months of the diet, but then lost muscle mass as they dieted down to extreme levels. It should also be noted that males tend to be more susceptible to muscle loss during dieting, while females tend to be able to retain more muscle mass during the process. For example, this similar case study explored the effects of a female physique competitor dieting down to around 15% body fat, which is a similar relative body fat to the previously mentioned male athlete over a 6-month period. However, as we can see, the female athlete was able to slightly increase fat-free mass over contest preparation, while simultaneously getting very lean. In either case, the ability to recomp definitely seems to be inhibited when body fat levels become lower and lower. Therefore, we are more likely to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time when we are at a moderate to high body fat range. And the last factor influencing our ability to recomp is training experience. Independent of energy balance, our potential to build muscle is greater when we are newer to training, and sees diminishing returns as we become more experienced. So we are less likely to experience recomposition and muscle growth, even in a surplus for that matter, in trainees with a higher training experience. For example, we can see in this study that recreational lifters performing resistance training and consuming a high protein diet saw 5 kilograms of muscle growth with a simultaneous 1.4 kilograms of fat loss. However, in this study, subjects saw 1.9 kilograms of muscle growth and 0.2 kilograms of fat loss, also during a resistance training program and consuming a high protein diet. So the magnitude of recomposition was far less in this study. This is probably because in this study, subjects had an average of almost 9 years of consistent lifting experience. So although in both cases recomposition was achieved, the magnitude was significantly different. The less experienced lifters saw greater muscle growth and fat loss, while the more experienced lifters saw less muscle growth and less fat loss. Therefore, it seems that our ability to experience body recomposition will be greater in newer lifters and lower in advanced lifters. Now that we've explored the individual components of what will influence body recomposition, let's now put all the pieces together to see how we can maximize our ability to build muscle while losing fat. First, we should eat in a calorie deficit to reduce body weight over time. A more conservative deficit, where we lose weight slowly over time, will increase our chances of building muscle in the process. Second, we need to ensure we are providing a good hypertrophic stimulus through resistance training. We should focus on hypertrophy style training to maximize the anabolic stimulus. We should also attempt to consume a high daily protein intake to maximize the hypertrophic adaptations from resistance training. We should aim to consume a minimum of around 1.5 grams per kilogram per day and further increase our protein intake if it is viable. And lastly, adequate sleep is likely to be favorable in the recomposition process. This seems to maximize muscle growth while allowing a greater proportion of fat to be lost through the dieting process. So to summarize this video, let's establish some practical recommendations. As we have now seen in the scientific research, it is certainly possible for muscle growth and fat loss to occur at the same time. However, there are many variables which can influence the likelihood and magnitude of this occurring. A trainee performing a good training protocol with a slow rate of weight loss, a high protein intake, adequate sleep each night, with a higher body fat and less training experience, is more likely to see significant recomposition. On the other side of the spectrum, a trainee with a poor training protocol, with a faster rate of weight loss, a lower protein intake, poor sleep, already at a lean body fat percentage, and highly experienced, is less likely to see any significant recomposition. So whether this can occur for yourself is dependent on such variables. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Check out flowhighperformance.com for online coaching, training templates, ebooks, and more.